Hello, and welcome back to Amplified History, a podcast about the long, strange, loud, and occasionally passport stamping history of rock and roll. I'm Robert. In our last episode, we followed rock and roll from 1957 to 1960. Buddy Holly helped sketch the blueprint for the modern band. Jerry Lee Lewis turned the piano into an emergency. The Everly Brothers made close harmony sound effortless. Ritchie Valens transformed La Bamba, and doo-wop groups built entire dream worlds out of human voices. We also reached a moment when some observers believed rock and roll was fading. Elvis was in the army. Little Richard had stepped away from secular music. Buddy Holly and Ritchie Valens were gone. The first explosion seemed to be losing momentum. But the music had not died. It had changed location. Before we follow it across the Atlantic, please like the episode and subscribe to the podcast. That helps new listeners find the series, and it ensures that you'll be here when the amplifiers get stranger, the hair gets longer, and the album covers become increasingly difficult to explain to grandparents. Today, we're covering the years from 1960 to 1965. Skiffle, Liverpool clubs, imported American records, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Animals, the Kinks, Motown, girl groups, surf music, television, screaming audiences, and the second major collapse of adult composure. To guide us through the invasion, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Finch, British music historian, former pirate radio researcher, and the only person I know who can identify a 1962 Merseybeat demo from the sound of the drummer dropping a stick.
Hello, Robert. In my defense, it was a very distinctive stick drop.
Was the drummer famous?
Not remotely.
Did the stick become famous?
It has a modest but dedicated following.
Any supernatural qualifications?
I once spent 3 nights in a Liverpool cellar club, listening for the ghost of a broken amplifier.
Did you hear it?
No, but I did hear a man upstairs move 12 beer crates at 4 in the morning.
Historically significant?
Extremely. He complained in perfect rhythm.
Let's begin with the basic question. Why did British teenagers become so fascinated with American rock and roll?
Because the records sounded like another world. Britain in the years after the Second World War was still marked by austerity. Many young people grew up in grey streets, strict schools, and homes shaped by their parents' memories of war.
And then Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis Presley, Fats Domino, and Buddy Holly arrive through the radio and record shops.
Exactly. Those records offered rhythm, style, humor, danger, and possibility. They suggested that life could be louder than the environment around you.
How did British listeners find the records?
Through several routes. Merchant sailors brought records back from American ports. Specialist shops imported them. Radio Luxembourg broadcast popular music into Britain. American servicemen stationed in Europe had records. Young musicians traded singles and searched for obscure rhythm and blues releases.
So finding a record could become a form of archaeology.
Very much so. Today you can hear almost anything within seconds. Then discovering a particular blues or rhythm and blues record might require luck, persistence, and a friend whose cousin knew a sailor.
The original streaming algorithm.
A man called Terry with a suitcase.
Did the scarcity make the records feel more valuable?
Absolutely. A rare single carried status. If you owned a record nobody else had heard, you possessed information. Musicians listened repeatedly, trying to understand the chords, the guitar tone, the rhythm, even the studio atmosphere.
Which means imitation becomes a form of education.
Precisely. Young British musicians did not begin by trying to sound original. They began by trying to reproduce sounds that felt miraculous.
Before the British beat groups, there was skiffle.
Yes, skiffle was absolutely crucial. It drew from American folk, blues, jazz, and jug band traditions. In Britain, it became a craze during the 1950s, especially through the success of Lonnie Donegan.
What made skiffle so important?
It was accessible. You did not need a conservatory education or a full professional orchestra. You could use a guitar, a washboard, a tea chest bass, and whatever else made a useful sound.
A tea chest bass.
A wooden chest, a broom handle, and a string. Elegant engineering.
Did it stay in tune?
Sometimes it stayed in the same building.
Good enough for rock and roll.
The important thing was that skiffle gave young people permission to form groups. Thousands of teenagers bought guitars, learned a few chords, and discovered that making music was something they could do themselves.
Including future members of the Beatles.
Yes, John Lennon formed the Quarrymen as a skiffle group. Paul McCartney joined, then George Harrison. Before they became the Beatles, they were part of this enormous grassroots movement.
So skiffle is not merely a strange preface.
No, it is the bridge between listening and participating. It turns admiration into action.
That's a major shift.
It is. A generation stops asking, how do professionals make records, and starts asking, where can we rehearse without being thrown out?
Skiffle sounds almost comically simple. A guitar, a washboard, perhaps a tea chest with a string attached.
And that simplicity changed British music. You did not need money, formal training, or permission. You needed 3 chords, several friends, and a room whose owner was temporarily absent.
So the British invasion begins not with luxury studios, but with teenagers making noise on improvised instruments.
Exactly. Skiffle was the great democratic noise. It told an entire generation, you may not own much, but you can still form a band.
There is something wonderfully direct about that.
And slightly terrifying for parents.
Which confirms its historical importance. Why does Liverpool become so central?
Liverpool was a port city with strong connections to the wider world. Records and sailors passed through. It had economic hardship, a distinctive local culture, and an active music scene. Young musicians could hear American rock and roll, rhythm and blues, country, and other styles.
The term Merseybeat comes from the River Mersey.
Yes, it became associated with the Liverpool beat group scene. There were many bands: Jerry and the Pacemakers, the Searchers, the Swinging Blue Jeans, and others. The Beatles emerged from that environment, but they were not alone.
Before they became famous, the Beatles spent long periods performing in Hamburg.
That experience was vital. In the early 1960s, they played clubs in Hamburg, often for very long sets and demanding audiences. They had to build stamina, expand their repertoire, sharpen their stagecraft, and learn how to hold a room.
So Beatlemania was not created by 4 young men casually walking into a studio with excellent hair.
No. The hair was the result of extensive field research.
The Hamburg years functioned like an apprenticeship.
A very intense one. They played rock and roll covers, rhythm and blues, pop songs, standards, anything that kept the audience engaged. By the time they returned to Liverpool, they were a much stronger live band.
Then Brian Epstein enters the story.
Brian Epstein became their manager and helped professionalize their presentation. He encouraged matching suits and a more polished stage image. That did not erase their humor or energy, but it made them easier to present to a wider audience.
He took a rough club band and gave them a visual frame.
Exactly. Then producer George Martin became another crucial figure. He worked with them in the studio, recognized their potential, and helped shape their recordings.
We should mention Pete Best and Ringo Starr.
Yes, Pete Best was the Beatles' drummer during important early years, including Hamburg. In 1962, he was replaced by Ringo Starr. That decision remains one of the most discussed personnel changes in pop history.
Somewhere, a historian is still arguing about it.
Several, in separate rooms, for safety.
When does the breakthrough happen?
The Beatles released Love Me Do in 1962. Then Please Please Me followed in early 1963 and became a major success. Their first album also arrived in 1963.
What makes Please Please Me such a useful record for this story?
It has urgency. The harmonica, vocal harmony, rhythm, and rising energy all work together. It sounds youthful, but not amateur. You can hear the band's live experience compressed into a pop single.
And John Lennon and Paul McCartney are writing songs.
That's central. At the time, many performers relied heavily on professional songwriters. Lennon and McCartney developed a songwriting partnership inside the band. Their success strengthened the idea that a group could write, perform, and gradually shape its own material.
Beatlemania follows.
Yes, by 1963, audiences in Britain were reacting with extraordinary intensity. Screaming became part of the phenomenon. The music mattered, but so did personality. Each Beatle seemed distinct. Their interviews were quick, funny, and irreverent.
They did not behave like obedient young entertainers.
Not quite. They were witty, sometimes cheeky, and comfortable challenging dull questions. That mattered to young audiences. They seemed modern.
Then America.
In February 1964, the Beatles appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. The television audience was enormous, and the performance became one of the defining moments of the British invasion.
The cultural mythology says that America stopped completely.
It did not literally stop. Several people continued washing dishes, but the impact was immense.
Thank you for preserving accuracy.
Young American audiences saw a self-contained British group playing guitars, singing original songs, and projecting a unified identity. Suddenly, thousands of new bands seemed possible.
Another generation asks, could we do that?
Exactly.
What did the Beatles actually change?
Several things at once. They strengthened the model of the band as a creative unit. They wrote much of their own material. They combined rock and roll, rhythm and blues, pop, country, vocal harmony, and other influences. They also evolved rapidly.
Their records from 1963 and 1965 do not sound identical.
Not at all. They were curious. They listened widely. They learned from American records, British music hall traditions, girl groups, Motown, Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and many others.
But the public story sometimes became the Beatles arrived and invented modern music.
That is far too simple. Their achievement was extraordinary, but they did not emerge from a vacuum. They transformed influences, and they were unusually skilled at turning those influences into songs with broad appeal.
We also need to remember the American musicians whose work they openly admired.
Absolutely. The Beatles covered songs associated with Chuck Berry, Little Richard, the Shirelles, the Marvelettes, Carl Perkins, and others. They helped expose some listeners to those artists, though the balance of attention and profit remained unequal.
So the story involves admiration, transformation, and the complicated economics of cultural exchange.
Precisely. Rock history becomes dishonest when it treats influence as either pure theft or pure isolation. The real story is often admiration operating inside unequal systems.
That's an important distinction.
And a useful one for the entire series.
If the Beatles were presented as charming and witty, the Rolling Stones were positioned differently.
Very deliberately. The Rolling Stones formed in London and built their identity around blues and rhythm and blues. Brian Jones, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Charlie Watts, Bill Wyman, and Ian Stewart were all important to the early story.
Ian Stewart becomes the less visible member.
Yes. Manager Andrew Loog Oldham believed Stewart did not fit the group's desired image, though Stewart continued working with them as a musician and road manager.
Image-making becomes explicit.
Very explicit. The Stones were marketed as the rougher, more dangerous alternative to the Beatles. There was even a famous publicity line asking whether you would let your daughter marry a Rolling Stone.
A remarkably efficient method of ensuring that daughters bought Rolling Stones records.
Exactly. Moral outrage remained excellent advertising.
Their early records leaned heavily on American blues and rhythm and blues material.
Yes, they covered songs by artists such as Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, and Howlin' Wolf. Their name came from a Muddy Waters song. They were passionate advocates for the blues.
Their version of It's All Over Now became their first British #1 single.
Correct. The song was written by Bobby Womack and Shirley Womack, and first recorded by the Valentinos. The Stones version brought it to a large, new audience.
Again, the path of a song matters.
Always. Who wrote it? Who recorded it first? Who had the hit? Who received attention? Those questions reveal the machinery behind the music.
The Stones eventually become major songwriters themselves.
Yes, Oldham encouraged Jagger and Richards to write. By 1965, songs such as The Last Time, and especially I Can't Get No Satisfaction, established them as creators of original material.
Satisfaction has one of the most recognizable riffs in rock history.
Keith Richards reportedly imagined the riff with a horns section in mind and recorded an early version on a portable tape machine. The fuzz guitar became the defining sound.
Another supposed temporary sketch becomes the permanent classic.
Rock history is full of people saying, "We'll replace that later," and then wisely failing to do so.
The Rolling Stones were marketed as dangerous. Newspapers worried about them. Parents disliked the hair. Publicists asked whether anyone would let a daughter marry one.
Which was brilliant advertising. Nothing sells a record to teenagers faster than an adult announcing that the musicians are unsuitable.
So the outrage was not merely an obstacle.
It became part of the product. The Stones did not just play rebellious music. They sold the fantasy that buying the record was a small act of disobedience.
And the parents supplied the marketing campaign for free.
With tremendous enthusiasm.
The Animals came from Newcastle.
Yes, they had a darker, bluesier sound, with Eric Burdon's powerful voice and Alan Price's organ playing central to their identity.
Their breakthrough was The House of the Rising Sun in 1964.
A remarkable record. The song itself was traditional, with a history extending far before the Animals. Different versions circulated in folk music. The Animals transformed it into a dramatic electric performance.
The guitar arpeggio is instantly recognizable.
Yes, and the organ gives the recording a solemn, almost church-like weight. Eric Burdon sings with astonishing intensity.
It is interesting that one of the British invasion's defining records is based on an old American folk song.
That is the Atlantic Exchange in miniature. An American traditional song travels through folk culture, is encountered by British musicians, and returns to American audiences in a new electric form.
Music crossing the ocean and coming back changed.
Exactly. Not copied unchanged, reframed.
The arrangement also stretches beyond the usual short pop single form.
Yes, it was unusually long for a hit single of the period, but the dramatic build justified it.
A record company executive somewhere must have checked the stopwatch and become pale.
Several memos were probably written.
Then we have the Kinks.
The Kinks formed in London, led by brothers Ray and Dave Davies. Their early breakthrough came with You Really Got Me in 1964.
That guitar sound feels like something tearing.
That's a good description. Dave Davies achieved the distorted tone by cutting the speaker cone of his amplifier.
We have returned to rock's proud tradition of equipment damage.
Entirely deliberate this time.
The riff is brutally simple.
And enormously effective. It is built from power chords and repetition. The sound points toward hard rock, garage rock, punk, and heavy metal.
How much can one damaged speaker influence?
In this case, rather a lot.
The Kinks also became more distinctly English in their songwriting.
Yes, Ray Davies developed an observational style focused on British life, class, neighbourhoods, fashion, and social behaviour. While many British bands began by imitating American records, the Kinks increasingly wrote songs that sounded rooted in England.
So the invasion eventually produces music that is not merely American rock with British accents.
Exactly. The British groups absorb American influences, then develop their own voices.
You Really Got Me sounds like the guitar amplifier is being torn open from the inside.
There is a reason. Dave Davies cut the speaker cone to create that distorted tone.
Deliberately?
Deliberately. One damaged speaker helped produce a riff that points toward hard rock, punk, and heavy metal.
So somewhere in 1964, a piece of audio equipment lost its structural integrity, and the future became louder.
Precisely. Never underestimate a teenager with a sharp object and an amplifier.
We need to make something very clear. While British bands were invading the American charts, American music had not stopped evolving.
Not remotely. The phrase British invasion can make it sound as though Britain arrived and found an empty country. In reality, American popular music was extraordinarily creative during these years.
Let's begin with Motown.
Motown Records was founded by Berry Gordy in Detroit. It developed a distinctive approach to songwriting, production, performance, and artist development. The label created hits with artists including The Miracles, The Marvelettes, Martha and the Vandellas, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, The Four Tops, and The Supremes.
The Funk Brothers played on many of those records.
Yes, they were Motown's extraordinary house band. Their playing helped define the Motown sound. Strong rhythm, memorable bass lines, tambourine accents, piano, guitars, drums, and arrangements designed to move.
Yet many listeners did not know their names.
Session musicians often shape famous records without receiving equal public recognition. The Funk Brothers are a major example.
The Supremes broke through spectacularly in 1964.
Where Did Our Love Go became their first #1 hit, followed by a remarkable run. Diana Ross, Florence Ballard, and Mary Wilson presented elegance, precision, and vocal appeal, backed by brilliant songwriting and production.
Holland Dozier Holland.
Brian Holland, Lamont Dozier, and Eddie Holland wrote and produced many classic Motown hits. Their work combined emotional clarity with irresistible structure.
So while British groups are learning from American records, Motown is creating new American records for the entire world.
Exactly. The influence continues moving in both directions.
We also need to talk about girl groups.
Absolutely. The early 1960s produced extraordinary girl group records: the Shirelles, the Ronettes, the Crystals, the Marvelettes, and many others.
These songs often placed teenage emotion at the center.
Yes. Love, uncertainty, desire, heartbreak, waiting, confidence, fear. The lyrics could be direct, but the productions were often sophisticated.
Phil Spector's wall of sound becomes important here.
It does. Spector layered instruments and voices to create dense, dramatic recordings. The sound could feel enormous, especially on small radios.
The producer becomes a major creative force.
Yes, though we should distinguish admiration for records from judgment of the people who made them. Music history contains extraordinary art created in deeply troubling circumstances.
And the Brill Building?
The Brill Building is shorthand for a professional songwriting culture in New York. Teams of writers created songs for performers. Carole King and Jerry Goffin, Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry, and many others wrote major hits.
Which complicates the idea that authenticity requires the performer to write everything.
It does. A brilliant song can emerge from a professional writing team. The question is not whether one model is morally superior. It is how different systems create different kinds of music.
The Beatles' success did increase pressure on bands to write their own material.
Yes, and that expectation became increasingly important. But it should not cause us to undervalue the extraordinary craft of professional songwriters.
On the American West Coast, another sound was developing.
Surf music. There was instrumental surf rock, associated with artists such as Dick Dale, and vocal surf pop, most famously represented by the Beach Boys.
Dick Dale's guitar style was aggressive and percussive.
Yes, he used rapid picking, heavy reverb, and powerful amplification. His music tried to capture the physical sensation of surfing.
The Beach Boys took another route.
Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys combined vocal harmony, Chuck Berry-influenced songwriting, youth themes, cars, surfing, romance, and increasingly ambitious studio production.
Their harmonies draw from the Four Freshmen.
Correct, along with other influences. Brian Wilson listened closely to vocal arrangements and production. The early Beach Boys records can sound sunny and simple, but the construction is often intricate.
And the Beatles were listening to them.
Very carefully. The British invasion was not a one-way conquest. The Beatles influenced the Beach Boys influenced the Beatles, and the competition pushed both toward greater ambition.
So the Atlantic becomes a feedback loop.
Exactly. A very tuneful feedback loop.
It's time for 5 records for the road. As always, these songs are not a ranking, and they are not the only important records from the period. They are 5 doors into the years from 1960 to 1965. Links to all 5 songs are available in the episode description, so you can listen after the show and hear the details for yourself.
And please listen through proper speakers if possible.
Not a telephone placed inside a cup?
Historically interesting, acoustically criminal.
First, The Beatles' Please Please Me from 1963.
Listen to the harmonica, the vocal harmony, and the accelerating sense of excitement. It captures the energy of a seasoned live band entering the pop marketplace.
Second, the Rolling Stones' It's All Over Now, from 1964.
Listen to the guitar attack and the confident vocal. Then trace the song back to Bobby Womack, Shirley Womack, and the Valentinos. The history of the song is part of the listening.
Third, The Animals, The House of the Rising Sun, from 1964.
Listen to the guitar arpeggio, the organ, and Eric Burdon's voice. Notice how an old traditional song becomes an electric drama.
Fourth, The Supremes, Where Did Our Love Go, from 1964.
Listen to the rhythm, the hand claps, the vocal restraint, and the precision of the production. The apparent simplicity is extremely carefully designed.
Fifth, The Kinks, You Really Got Me, from 1964.
Listen to the distorted guitar tone and the blunt force of the riff. It is simple enough to imitate and powerful enough to change the direction of rock guitar.
5 records and 1 year, 1964, does an extraordinary amount of work.
It was a busy year. Hairdressers and amplifier technicians were under severe pressure.
Additional listening?
Gladly. The Beatles, A Hard Day's Night. The Rolling Stones, The Last Time. The Animals, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. The Kinks, All Day and All of the Night. The Ronettes, Be My Baby. The Beach Boys, I Get Around. Martha and the Vandellas, Dancing in the Street. The Temptations, My Girl.
The episode description is now applying for municipal library status.
It has excellent opening hours.
Let's stand at the end of 1965. What has changed?
The band has become the central unit of rock culture. Groups write their own songs, develop visual identities, and are expected to evolve. Electric guitar has become even more important. British musicians are now major participants in a form rooted deeply in American music.
American artists are also responding.
Yes, Motown is thriving. Soul music is growing. The Beach Boys are becoming more ambitious. Bob Dylan is bringing literary songwriting into closer contact with electric rock. Folk musicians are listening to bands, and bands are listening to folk musicians.
The audience is changing too.
Rock is no longer only dance music for teenagers. It is beginning to carry heavier cultural expectations. Listeners want songs that say something about identity, politics, society, and personal freedom.
And the album is becoming more important.
Increasingly. Singles still dominate, but artists are starting to think more carefully about albums as unified statements.
So the next episode will not simply be more hit records.
No, it will involve experimentation, protest, expanded consciousness, studio innovation, and several musicians discovering that 3 minutes is no longer enough.
Dangerous.
Especially for radio schedules.
Next time, we move from 1965 to 1969.
Bob Dylan goes electric. The Beatles retreat further into the studio. Jimi Hendrix rewrites the possibilities of the electric guitar. San Francisco becomes a center of psychedelic culture. Soul music speaks with growing force. Festivals become cultural events.
And rock begins presenting itself as art.
Yes, not merely entertainment, not merely rebellion, but art with ambitions comparable to literature, cinema, and modern painting.
Which sounds very serious.
It is serious.
Will there still be jokes?
There will be a sitar.
I accept that as an answer.
You should also prepare for concept albums, liquid light shows, feedback, protest songs, and trousers of increasing width.
We have reached the period when clothing begins responding to the music.
Or attempting to escape it.
Dr. Finch, before we go, what should listeners carry away from this episode?
The British invasion did not begin with Britain inventing rock and roll. It began with British musicians listening intensely to American records, blues, rhythm and blues, rock and roll, country, soul, and pop.
They copied first.
They copied, practiced, transformed, and eventually developed their own voices. The Beatles expanded the idea of the self-contained band. The Rolling Stones carried blues and rhythm and blues into a new public image. The Animals electrified traditional song. The Kinks helped define the future of the guitar riff.
And America was still creating extraordinary music.
Absolutely. Motown, girl groups, the Brill Building, surf music, the Beach Boys, soul, and countless regional scenes were all active. The real story is not Britain replacing America. It is music moving back and forth across the Atlantic, changing every time it travels.
A conversation rather than a conquest.
Precisely.
Thank you, Dr. Finch.
Thank you, Robert.
Any final report from the 1962 demo archive?
The famous dropped drumstick has been authenticated.
By whom?
The drummer's cousin's former landlord.
That sounds rigorous.
He remembers the sound perfectly.
Does the stick have representation?
The Pompadour comb recommended an agent.
The archive objects are organizing.
We should be worried.
Thank you for listening to Amplified History. Links to the 5 featured songs are available in the episode description. Listen closely, trace the influences, and notice how every record carries pieces of other records inside it. If you enjoyed the episode, please like it, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with someone who owns a guitar, a washboard, or a tea chest that may already be halfway to becoming a bass.
Check the broom cupboard.
Next time, electricity, psychedelia, protest, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles in the studio, San Francisco, festivals, and the moment rock decides that reality might benefit from additional colors. Until then, keep the volume just slightly unreasonable.